The dead of night, the air thick with the kind of silence that presses against your skin, I stood frozen on that balcony, staring into the darkness across the way. A figure moved in the window opposite mine, her back to me, shoulders hunched as if in some heated argument with shadows I couldn't see. My voice cut through the quiet, hesitant calling out, "What happened?" And then she turned. Slowly, deliberately, her face twisting into view, closer than she had any right to be. Eyes locked on mine with a hunger that chilled the blood in my veins. On this channel, horror stories are told in a fully cinematic, audio-first way, so you never have to look at the screen to feel the fear. You are listening to Mr. Night Fear, where the darkness doesn't end when the story does. Let me take you back to where this all began, or at least where I first felt that subtle shift in the air, the kind that makes you question if the world around you is still the one you know. It was during one of those long, humid summers in a small village tucked away in the hills, the sort of place where time seems to stretch out endlessly, and the nights swallow everything whole. I'd come to stay with my grandmother, seeking a break from the noise of the city, thinking the quiet would clear my head. But quiet has a way of amplifying things you'd rather not hear. Whispers in the wind, creaks in the old wooden beams, and sometimes the faint echo of laughter that doesn't belong. My cousin Raj lived there year-round, helping with the farm and keeping an eye on things. He was the practical type, always grounded, or so I thought. We'd spend evenings up on the rooftop, escaping the stuffy rooms below, staring out at the patchwork of neighboring houses under the fading light. The rooftops were like little islands in the sea of dusk, each one holding its own secrets. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted everything in shades of bruised purple, our gaze drifted to the house next door. It was an old structure, weathered and forgotten-looking, with cracked walls that seemed to lean in on themselves. There she was, a young girl, no more than 10 or 11 years old, moving in endless circles on that rooftop. Her steps were light, almost playful at first glance, but there was something off about the rhythm, like a record skipping in the same groove over and over. She'd pause now and then, tilting her head back to let out a laugh that carried across the gap between our houses, sharp and echoing in the still air. It wasn't the joyful sound of a child at play. It was hollow, forced, as if she were mimicking something she'd heard, but didn't understand. Raj shifted beside me, his usual easy demeanor tightening. "We should head down," he murmured, his voice low, like he didn't want to disturb the scene. I glanced at him, puzzled. "We just got up here. The breeze is nice tonight." He didn't meet my eyes, staring fixedly at the girl. "You don't get it. That's not normal. She's not right." I chuckled softly, trying to brush it off. In my mind, I was the rational one, fresh from the city with its doctors and explanations. "Come on, Raj. She's probably just dealing with some kind of issue, maybe anxiety or something undiagnosed. Villages like this, people jump to superstitions because it's easier than facing the real problems." But his face hardened, and he grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the stairs. "Easier or not, I'm telling you, stay away from looking too long." We descended into the house, the laughter fading behind us, but it lingered in my thoughts that night, replaying like a distant radio signal I couldn't tune out. The next morning, over a simple breakfast of flatbread and tea, Raj avoided the topic until I brought it up. "Let's go up again today," I suggested. "Maybe earlier before it gets dark." He shook his head firmly. "Not if she's there. You go check first. If it's clear, call me." I rolled my eyes but humored him, climbing the narrow steps alone. The rooftop was empty, the neighboring one bare under the harsh midday sun. I called down to him, and he joined me reluctantly, settling against the low wall with a sigh. As we sat there, the conversation turned to the house next door. Raj leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if the walls could hear. "They're new to the village, that family. Moved in not long ago. At first the girl was like any other kid, running around the yard, chattering away. But something changed after they settled in that place. I leaned forward, intrigued despite myself. My grandmother had always spun tales of the old days, stories that blurred the line between fact and folklore, and I found myself drawn to them like a moth to flame. "What do you mean, changed?" He paused, glancing over his shoulder. "People talk. Some say the land there was once sacred ground, a resting place for the forgotten, disturbed when the house was built. Others whisper about the family who lived there before. Tragic end, they say. The husband lost his mind one stormy night, did unspeakable things to his own kin, buried the remnants right under the foundation. Curses like that don't wash away with rain." It was chilling the way he said it, but my city-bred skepticism kicked in. Myths, I told myself. Stories born from boredom and fear of the unknown. Humans have a way of filling silence with horrors to make sense of the senseless. Still, a seed of unease planted itself in my chest, growing roots in the quiet moments. That afternoon, she appeared again, her circles resuming as if no time had passed. Raj tensed immediately. "Her father locks her up there every day now. Says she won't rest, won't close her eyes. Paces from dawn till dusk, and into the night." I watched her, trying to see beyond the surface. "Maybe she sleeps during the day, when no one's looking." "No," he replied flatly. "She doesn't sleep at all. Not anymore." We retreated downstairs as the shadows lengthened, the air growing heavy with unspoken warnings. Dinner was quiet that evening. The family gathered around the table, sharing mundane talk of the fields and weather. But my mind wandered, replaying the girls' laughter, wondering about the weight of isolation in a place like that. What does it do to a person, being cut off, left to circle in their own thoughts? Fear isn't always about monsters. Sometimes it's the slow erosion of sanity in the quiet. Night fell like a blanket, thick and oppressive. I lay on my mat, the room shared with Raj, listening to the distant calls of night birds and the creak of the house settling. Sleep came in fits, fragmented by dreams I couldn't quite recall. Then, a shout pierced the darkness, sharp, anguished, coming from outside. I bolted upright, heart pounding. "Raj," I whispered urgently, shaking his shoulder. "Did you hear that? Someone's yelling." He mumbled something incoherent, still lost in sleep. "Stay put." Might be her. But curiosity, that dangerous pull, won out. What if someone needed help? What if it was real trouble, not just village tales? I slipped out to the balcony, the cool night air raising goosebumps on my skin. The window across the way was dimly lit, and there she was, her back to me, gesturing wildly as if in furious debate with an invisible presence. My pulse quickened. "What happened?" I called out, my voice echoing unnaturally loud in the stillness. She stilled, then turned, oh so slowly, her form seeming to shift, drawing nearer without moving. Her face filled my vision, eyes wide and unblinking, a smile twisting her lips that held no warmth. A scream tore from her throat, raw and piercing, and in that instant, the world tilted. I stumbled back into the room, slamming the door behind me, chest heaving. The darkness inside felt alive, pressing in. I turned toward where Raj should be, seeking reassurance in the familiar. But the bed wasn't empty. She was there, perched where he had been, her small frame unnaturally still, those same eyes fixed on me. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, carrying the weight of something ancient and wrong. "I told you not to go." The words hung in the air, echoing in my mind long after the night swallowed them. What draws us to look when every instinct screams to turn away? Perhaps it's the human need to understand, to pierce the veil of mystery, only to find that some shadows are better left untouched. And in the silence that follows, you're left wondering, was the warning for me or for something else entirely? Sleep well if you can. In the haze of a fevered half-sleep, I stood at the edge of the rooftop, the wind whispering secrets through the gaps in the old stone parapet, carrying the faint, metallic tang of something spilled long ago. Below, the courtyard stretched out like a forgotten dream, shadows pooling where the lights didn't reach. And there, in the quiet that pressed against my ears like unseen hands, I heard it, a soft, deliberate step behind me. Not a threat, not yet, but a presence that pulled at the threads of my unraveling mind, urging me closer to the drop. The air grew thick, the silence screaming with possibilities unspoken, and I wondered, in that suspended moment, if the fall was the only way to claim what I'd come to crave. On this channel, horror stories are told in a fully cinematic audio-first way, so you never have to look at the screen to feel the fear. You are listening to Mr. Nightfear, where the darkness doesn't end when the story does. Sometimes, the things that haunt us aren't born from the dark corners of the world, but from the quiet spaces inside our own heads, the places where ambition twists into something sharper, more insistent. It's easy to dismiss at first, that subtle itch, like a thought you can't quite shake. But give it time, let it simmer in the silence of your days, and it grows, feeding on the what-ifs and the almosts until it's all you can hear. I remember the first time I felt it, arriving at Eldridge Hall, a sprawling estate-turned academy nestled in the forgotten hills where the fog never quite lifts, the kind of place that promises excellence but delivers something else entirely, a slow unraveling that starts with a whisper and ends in echoes you can't escape. It wasn't the building itself that set my nerves on edge, though its towering spires and weathered stone carried the weight of too many untold stories. No, it was the air, thick, almost tangible, carrying a faint undercurrent that clung to your skin like damp cloth. I'd come seeking a fresh start, drawn by tales of unparalleled achievement, the sort of education that could reshape a life. My ride there had been uneventful, the driver a quiet man with a habit of glancing skyward, muttering about the weather as if it held some private grudge. He handed me a thin scarf before dropping me off, insisting I wrap it around my face. "For the chill," he said, his voice muffled through his own covering. I humoured him, thinking it eccentric. But as I stepped out, the mist rolled in, and I felt that first prickling unease, like the world was watching, waiting for me to notice. The grounds were pristine, manicured lawns stretching into the distance, dotted with students moving in purposeful clusters. Their conversations floated by in fragments, grades, rankings, the relentless pursuit of the top. I caught snippets as I made my way to the main hall. "He's untouchable," one whispered, her tone laced with something between awe and resentment. Another laughed, but it was hollow, the sound dying too quickly in the heavy air. I shook it off, focusing on the rhythm of my footsteps echoing off the stone paths, the way the fog muffled everything into a soft, isolating hush. Humans have a way of rationalizing the strange, don't we? We tell ourselves it's just nerves, just the newness of it all, ignoring how silence can amplify the doubts creeping in. My first encounter with the principal, Ms. Harlan, came in the grand foyer, a space that felt more like a relic than a welcome. She was a wiry woman, her movements precise, her smile practiced but not quite reaching her eyes. Those were flat, like polished stones reflecting nothing back. "Welcome," she said, her voice smooth, carrying through the empty room with an authority that demanded attention. We spoke of expectations, of the Academy's legacy, but her words lingered oddly, repeating in my mind like a loop I couldn't break. "You'll find your place here," she murmured, her gaze holding mine a beat too long. "And perhaps if you're driven enough, you'll rise above the rest. It was innocuous, or so it seemed, but as I left, a faint pressure built behind my eyes, a whisper of potential that felt less like motivation and more like an intrusion. My roommate, Clara, was waiting in our shared quarters, a sparse room with 2 beds pushed against opposite walls, the space between them feeling wider than it should. She was slight, with hair tied back in a loose knot, her expression distant as she arranged books on her shelf. "You'll get used to it," she said without looking up, her voice flat, as if reciting lines from a script. We talked little that night, but in the pauses, I sensed her unrest. The way she'd pause mid-sentence, staring at the window as if expecting something to appear. "It's the drive," she explained later, over a shared meal in the dimly lit dining hall. "Everyone wants to be the best. It gets under your skin." Her laugh was brittle, breaking off into silence that stretched between us, filled only with the distant clatter of utensils and murmured conversations from other tables. As days turned to weeks, that drive Clara mentioned began to manifest in subtle ways. Classes were intense, the curriculum pushing boundaries of thought and endurance, but it was the undercurrent that unnerved me. The glances exchanged between students, the unspoken hierarchies that dictated who sat where, who spoke first. At the center of it all was Elias Thorne, the reigning top student, a figure both admired and shadowed by envy. He moved through the halls with quiet confidence, his presence drawing eyes like a magnet. I first noticed him in philosophy, where his insights cut through the room, leaving others in contemplative silence. But there was something off about the admiration. It bordered on fixation, a hunger that simmered just beneath the surface. I tried to keep my distance at first, focusing on my own work, but the thoughts crept in during the quiet hours. Comparisons, what-ifs. What made him so exceptional? Why him and not someone else? The Academy's isolation amplified it. No outside world to distract, just the endless fog rolling in, muffling the boundaries between ambition and obsession. Nights grew longer, sleep fractured by dreams where I chased shadows, always one step behind. Clara's warnings came in hushed tones. "It starts small, but it builds. You start seeing him everywhere, in your notes, in your reflections." She spoke from experience, her own eyes carrying that distant glaze, as if part of her was already lost to the pull. The incidents began subtly, whispers of accidents that weren't quite right. A student slipping from a high walkway during a late-night study session, the thud echoing through the grounds like a muffled cry. Another found dazed at the base of the East Tower, muttering about reaching higher. No one spoke of them openly. The faculty dismissed them as misfortunes, urging us to focus on our pursuits. But in the silences, questions lingered. Why the falls? What drove them to the edge? Psychological strain, perhaps, the human mind buckling under pressure, seeking release in the most final ways. Or something more insidious, an airborne whisper that twisted desires into desperations, making the unattainable feel like the only thing worth chasing. My own descent was gradual, marked by moments of clarity drowned in growing fixation. I'd catch myself watching Elias during lectures, noting the cadence of his voice, the precision of his arguments, envy blooming into a need to surpass, to claim. Conversations with him were sparse, charged with undercurrents. A shared glance in the library, a brief exchange over texts that left me replaying words long into the night. "You're close," he'd say with a knowing smile, but it felt like a taunt, fueling the fire. Attempts to connect turned fraught. Plans fell through, excuses piled up, each one widening the chasm while narrowing my world to him. Clara noticed the change, her voice soft in the dim light of our room. "It's like a fever," she confided one evening, as rain pattered against the window, a rhythmic reminder of the world beyond. "You think you can fight it, but it reshapes you." Her own struggles surfaced in quiet admissions, nights spent plotting ways to outshine, only to falter in the execution. We shared strategies at first, distractions like long walks in the fog-shrouded gardens or immersing in unrelated books. But the pull strengthened, isolation breeding confusion, silences filled with imagined slights and unrealized potentials. The turning point came in fragments. An overheard plot in the shadows of the stairwell, students murmuring about dethroning the untouchable. Elias seemed impervious, emerging unscathed from mishaps that should have broken him. A shove during a heated debate, a fall averted by sheer luck. Or was it luck? The Academy's air felt heavier then, charged with unspoken intents, each breath carrying the weight of collective yearning. I found myself drawn into it, thoughts veering toward extremes, the line between admiration and annihilation blurring in the quiet hours. As the obsession deepened, reality frayed at the edges. Days lost coherence, marked by blackouts where I'd awaken with plans scrawled in frantic handwriting, diagrams of ascents and overtakes. Clara's presence became an anchor, then a mirror, her own mania reflecting mine, our conversations circling the same void. "What if it's not just us?" she'd whisper, her voice trembling in the dark. "What if the place itself feeds it, turning silence into something alive?" Unanswered questions piled up. Why the resilience? What hidden force sustained the hierarchy, making the top both prize and peril? In the end, it's the lingering implications that unsettle most, the way a simple drive can morph into a devouring force, leaving you questioning every ambition, every quiet urge. What happens when the pursuit isolates you so completely that the fall feels like the only ascent? And in those still moments after, when the fog clears just enough to see the edge, you have to wonder, is the drop waiting for you, or have you been leaning toward it all along? Rest easy, if the silence lets you. In the dim glow of a phone screen that shouldn't have been there, I knelt on the cold floorboards, my breath catching in ragged bursts as the messages scrolled under my trembling fingers. Words I'd sent, accusations I'd hurled into the void, now staring back at me like accusations of their own. And the replies, not from her, not really. From a child trying to hold the pieces together in the silence I'd refused to hear. The room spun, the weight of unspoken loss crashing down, and in that moment, I realized the ghosts we fear most are the ones we build ourselves. On this channel, horror stories are told in a fully cinematic, audio-first way, so you never have to look at the screen to feel the fear. You are listening to Mr. Night Fear, where the darkness doesn't end when the story does. There's a certain kind of quiet that settles into a home when things start to unravel, not the peaceful sort, but the kind that hums with unspoken tensions, like the low buzz of a wire about to snap. It creeps in slowly, disguising itself as routine, until one day you pause in a doorway and wonder if the emptiness was always there, or if you've just stopped filling it. That's how it was for me, in those long months that blurred into one another, living in a house that felt both too full and achingly vacant. I'd always been a night owl by necessity, pulling shifts at the warehouse where the hours stretched like shadows under fluorescent lights. It paid the bills, kept the roof over our heads, but it meant coming home to a world already winding down without me. My wife Lena used to wait up sometimes, back when the spark was fresh, brewing coffee that filled the air with that rich, grounding aroma, her laughter cutting through the fatigue like a warm light. But lately, or maybe not so lately, that had faded. We'd become experts at missing each other, our lives orbiting in parallel, but never quite aligning. It started with the messages, I think. Small things at first. I'd text her from work, something simple like checking in, and the reply would come delayed, clipped. "Why bother?" she'd type one night, the words landing like a sigh I could almost hear. I'd fire back, defensive, my fingers jabbing at the screen. "I work nights, you know that." Then nothing. The typing indicator would dance, appearing, vanishing, teasing, and leave me hanging in that digital limbo. Silence has a texture in those moments. It thickens the air around you, makes you question if the words were ever meant to connect at all. When I dragged myself home in the early hours, the signs of her were everywhere, yet nowhere. The kitchen counter might hold a mug, steam long gone, but the ceramic still holding a faint warmth if I pressed my palm to it. A smudge of lipstick on the edge, a color I didn't recognize, deeper, bolder than her usual soft pink. It felt like a clue, or maybe a taunt. Had she rushed out, forgotten it in the haze of her own day? I'd stand there, the house creaking softly around me, and let the familiarity wash over, mixed with that growing unease. Humans cling to these little artifacts, don't we? Proof of presence in a world that feels increasingly absent. Upstairs, the bed told its own story. Her side rumpled, the pillow dipped as if her head had rested there not long ago. I traced the creases in the sheets with my fingers, imagining the warmth fading like a memory. Relief would flicker. She was here, at least. But it soured quickly into something heavier. Doubt. Why the distance? Why the half-conversations? Our daughter, Mia, barely 14, had withdrawn into her own world. Earbuds, a constant barrier. Her responses to my questions little more than shrugs. Teenagers build walls, I told myself. It's normal. But in the quiet of those mornings, alone with my thoughts, I'd wonder if the silence was contagious, spreading through the house like damp in the walls. The arguments escalated in fragments, scattered across days. Another buzz at work. You never listen, I'm tired. My reply sharp. I'm trying. You won't even discuss it. More dots. More nothing. I'd scroll back during breaks, the thread a timeline of erosion, promises turning to pleas, affection to accusation. When did it shift? Was it the late nights or something deeper, a fracture I'd ignored? Grief, they say, isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a quiet denial, the mind weaving illusions to shield itself from the break. But I didn't see it then. I just felt the pull, the ache of reaching for someone slipping away. One morning the mug was missing, cleaned, put away as if erasing evidence. But the hairbrush remained by the sink, strands of her dark hair caught in the bristles, casual, intimate. I picked it up, the weight familiar, and a scent hit me. Her shampoo, faint but unmistakable, lingering like an echo. Is Mom still upset? I'd ask Mia over breakfast, pouring cereal into bowls that clinked too loudly in the stillness. No answer. Just the tinny leak of music from her headphones. I let it go, like so many things. Nights blurred further. Messages grew colder. Do you even want this? Of course. Then stop vanishing. Vanishing. The word stuck, burrowing in. I wasn't choosing it. The job, the hours, they chose me. Or so I thought. Home again, the bed more disturbed than before, sheets twisted as if from restless sleep. Warmth still there. I hesitated in the doorway, anger simmering, then guilt, then a shame that settled deep. I took the couch that night, the springs protesting under me, the house sighing in response. Objects began to migrate, appearing like remnants of a life half-lived. A scarf draped over a chair, soft and forgotten. Her coat hanging crooked on the hook, sleeves brushing the floor. The bathroom air heavy with that shampoo scent, steam from a recent shower clouding the mirror. I'd call out sometimes, "Lena?" My voice swallowed by the empty rooms. No reply. Just the hum of the fridge downstairs, the distant tick of a clock. Isolation creeps in like that, doesn't it? Not with a bang, but with unanswered echoes, leaving you to fill the voids with your own fears. The breaking point came unexpectedly. My boss pulled me aside mid-shift, his voice low over the warehouse din. Performance slipping, focus gone. Go home early, he said. "Sort it out." I drove back in the pre-dawn haze, mind racing with words I'd say. Apologies, bridges to rebuild. The house loomed dark, unnaturally still, the kind of quiet that doesn't invite you in but warns you away. No lights, no sounds, just the creak of my steps on the stairs, each one amplifying the thud of my heart. The bedroom door stood slightly open, a sliver of shadow spilling out. I pushed it wider, words dying on my lips. Mia was there, on Lena's side of the bed, curled tight into the impression in the mattress, blanket clutched like a shield. Her face, even in sleep, looked worn, lines of exhaustion that no child should carry. Her phone, no, wait, it was Lena's, the case I recognized, lay beside her, screen aglow with an open thread. I shouldn't have looked. But the pull was magnetic, that human urge to uncover what we've been avoiding. My hands, steady from years of manual work, shook as I picked it up. Messages from me to Lena, but scrolling up revealed the truth in fragments. Replies not laced with resentment, but sorrow. "I miss you every day. Wish I could hear you. Why did you have to go?" Deeper. "Dad forgets again." I try reminding him, but he yells. "Using your phone to answer. Maybe it'll help him remember." I sleep here. It still feels like you. Timestamps stretching back months. A floodgate broke then. Memories I'd buried surging forth. The accident, the phone call in the dead of night, the hospital smells, sterile and final, the way the world cracked open, and I'd pieced it back with denial, crafting a reality where she lingered in texts and traces. Grief doesn't just break you, it reshapes you, whispers lies to keep the pain at bay. Unanswered questions pile up. How long had Mia carried this alone? What shadows had I cast in my blindness? She stirred, eyes fluttering open. "Dad?" Her voice small, fragile. I knelt there, the phone heavy in my hand, a final message from me glowing unread. Why won't you talk? The horror isn't in the loss itself, but in the illusions we cling to, the silences we fill with phantoms. What happens when the mind, desperate to hold on, builds a bridge over the void, only to find it's been walking it alone? And in the quiet that follows, you have to ask, how many other absences are we arguing with right now, without even knowing?